Hello and welcome to Tippcast with myself, Shane Stapleton, Shane Brophy alongside me as ever. How things with you, Shane?
Not too bad. Loving the jam here at the moment.
Yeah. That'll get you in the form to talk about a hurling, bit of Gaelic football and so on and so forth. Funnily enough, just before we came on live here, we were talking a bit about the current demise of the Dublin footballers. No doubt they'll be back in time. But and just even in terms of how it looks like Dublin or Limerick could dominate in the hurling for a long time, and you were saying that maybe when Paul Kinnerk is no longer involved with them down the line, that things could change. But the other thing is there's probably so many copycat type coaches who are looking at what Limerick are doing and thinking we can do some of that too. So there might be a bit of a, when Jim McGuinness brought in what he brought into football, that there's copycats, and maybe it's just going to go this way for a number of years at the very least.
Oh, could well happen. I just think it's very, very hard for anybody to replicate what a top class coach do. It was very hard for what Desi Farrell was going to do to try and replicate Jim Gavin, and it's just, as I said, we've all seen it the last few weeks. Like they're just doing things they never did under Jim Gavin, wasting possession, shooting from stupid positions, like just unbelievable stuff. Like it just shows you you think that somebody else is going to slot in with the same group of players and it'll just carry on. But I tell you, it just shows you the value of a manager and a top class coach. And if you bring in something completely different, there's no guarantee the players are going to buy into it or be comfortable in what they're being asked to do.
Yeah, and even like when you keep those players on for so long as Jim Gavin did, and you're getting every last drop out of them, and you keep that group together for as long as possible, then if a nice few of them leave all of a shot, think of the number of footballers of the year that aren't available to them at the moment. Some of them who are still in their prime, Jack McCaffrey, Paul Mannion, who's been, I'm pretty sure he's won an All-Star in the past. To lose them all of a shot, you can be in serious bother. But I don't think we have to worry about that happening with Limerick for, I don't know, the short term. Anyway, Do you know what I often think though, and I probably said this in the past, is one of the biggest things in terms of like a team keeping it together after they've won an All-Ireland is that they don't sort of lose the head and, start getting egos and going out on the beer and getting themselves in trouble and all that kind of stuff, which we've seen with different teams over the year. I mean, the pandemic was no good for anyone. But the thing with Limerick is that, especially after 2020 and rolling into 2021, there's no opportunity for them to go out and lose the head.
No, I think that they were so fortunate in that respect. And I think, you could say definitely the last two, like you could say they were benefited by the pandemic. They probably lost their eye in 2019 off the back of the 2018 success, and you had maybe a couple of issues at the Fenway Classic there. Was it the Fenway thing or was it an All-Star trip? I can't remember. But look, they've all been nipped in the bud now, and I just think it was so important for Limerick to, like, they've won 3 and 4 years. Like when you're just getting in that, like Kilkenny did, when you were starting to win them regularly. And I suppose that was the thing that hurt Tipperary from becoming a dynasty, was they never did the 2 in a row. I suppose 11 was their best opportunity, because like they were flying through that championship, and just don't know whether they got a little soft heading into that All-Ireland, thinking that Kilkenny were on the slide and we were the team coming through, and they're just mentally a bit weak that day. And look, I've watched that game back a few times. Kilkenny weren't wonderful. It wouldn't have taken an awful lot more for Tipp to win that, even though they were well beaten by 4 points, but it wouldn't have taken an awful lot more to sneak that game, even though Tipp were very poor in the day.
Yeah, I don't think Tipp scored till about the 15th minute of that game, so slow out of the blocks. Yeah. But anyway, we've loads to come on the show today. We're going to be talking about Tipperary hosting Dublin this weekend, and Dublin are flying so far this year. We're going to be talking about the footballers who obviously didn't get to play their game against Wexford last weekend because of the bad weather. And we're going to have Thomas Conway on talking about the camogie and the ladies' football also. So let's start off with Tipperary against Dublin this weekend. A couple of years ago, Dublin came to Semple Stadium and won in a league quarter-final, and obviously they went on and pushed Limerick pretty hard then in the semi-final after it in Nolan Park. I was at that game. But generally, Tipperary, when they've hosted Dublin in Thurles, they've absolutely hammered them.
Yeah. I think apart from that win for Dublin, their record in Thurles is not great, even in neutral games. I think they beat Limerick in an All-Ireland quarter-final there maybe about 10 years ago. But apart from that, they've lost to Tipp, they lost to Cork in the qualifiers last year.
And the year
but I
before.
I think it's a big game for both counties. I think the winner of this game will get to the league semi-finals. So like Tipp have Waterford and Antrim to come. Dublin have Kilkenny and Laois. So like you're thinking whoever can pick up the win here is probably going to pick up another win down the line and is going to get through. So look for Dublin, I think Matty Kenny is thinking, look, if we can go to Tipp and win, that's backing up what we've done in the league so far. Like, but it's justifying everything we've done. Well, for Tipp, it's I think for a team like Tipperary who's looking to find itself under Colin Bonner, you need the more competitive games, the better. So if you can get to a league semi-final, that's a 6 competitive game. Please God, you might get to a league final at 7. So I think you'll have 2 teams really going all out for the win this weekend.
Yeah, and just to reflect on Dublin's performances so far, they drew with Waterford the first day out. Now, this was on the back of winning the Walsh Cup in fairly emphatic circumstances, hammering Wexford in the final of that. But they drew at home to Waterford in Parnell Park, 21 points to 215. Then they played against Antrim away from home. I think that was up in Corrigan Park, and they won 219 to 215. And Matty Kenny couldn't be there due to the sad passing of his mother. So I presume he'll be back on the sideline this weekend. Dublin are a team that I think have moved on nicely with their game plan. They're in year 4 under Matty. So, I mean, we know that Tipperary are just trying to find themselves with this new game plan. And like we were chatting just beforehand, that there does seem to be a realization within Tipperary that we can't just let the ball do the work all the time. So this transition, this changing of style is necessary if Tipperary are going to get back to where Tipperary want to be. I wonder, like from Dublin's point of view, one of the things that has cost them sometimes against Tipperary and definitely against Cork and Semple Stadium the past couple of years is, do they have the legs? Do they have the pace? And, you know, for a team that in the past traditionally has Tipperary have had good movement of forwards in the last few years and drag teams around the place, can Dublin keep with that? Because they look like a team that was lacking pace against Cork the last couple of years. Is that something where you feel that Tipperary can again exploit them?
I think that they definitely can. I think Dublin will try and force this match into the middle third, like really turn it into a physical battle where they probably are physically stronger in probably in that middle third area where they're very, very comfortable in sort of carrying the ball into the challenge and maybe offloading it in the tackle and things like that. That's certainly an MO, and like trying to get long range shots off as well. So I think it'll be interesting to see how the Tipperary team set up. I know we're probably going to go through what we might think might be a good start in 15 for the game. Like particularly the way Dublin set up as a sweeper like Tipp. And we had assumed the Tipp management know that that's coming, that Tipp will maybe pick the team accordingly, that you're picking a team to have maybe a pivot there just to cut off that supply. And like I would think it's a game. Well, I'll go through it in a few minutes. It's a game made for Paddy Cadell, I think, to be in that maybe that sweeper role for Tipperary. If as we expect, Dublin will play a sweeper at the other end.
Yeah, I'd imagine that Conor Burke, who's just a fine hurler for Dublin, that he'll be sitting back a little bit. Chris Crummy will be up and down the field all day. I mean, he's such a physical athlete and a great test for whoever Tipperary put on him. I mean, you could see a heavyweight clash of himself and Michael Breen in the middle of the field, and that'd be interesting. But of course, the middle of the field is going to be so flooded. It's not like the previous days where, you know, all the time you could have someone charging up through the centre of the field. I mean, ideally, that's the whole plan of what Tipperary and Dublin are doing, is move the ball through the hands and then release somebody. But the middle area could be absolutely flooded here. There's a great test for whoever plays in the full forward line for Tipperary here, because one thing we know about Dublin is they have a brilliant array of players who can play in the full back line. Owen O'Donnell, like you could argue that he's the best full back in the country. I think there'd be a toss of a coin between himself and Dahi Burke. Maybe there's another player you could add in there. Keane O'Callaghan, obviously I know him very well from Coola. He's a really good defender. Had a rash red card a couple of games ago, but that's a very rare thing for him. Andy Nolan is an option. Paddy Smith has been playing centre back. I wonder will the likes of Liam Rush or some of the other options be available for centre back and move him back. So if you're a full forward, you know, Mark Keogh, Dennis Maher and Jake Morris have been kind of in and around that area the last few days. You're going to be up against a serious calibre of defender.
Oh, definitely. And sure, what Andrew Dunphy as well. Like, I think he's really coming along nicely. Like, so, like this was a game I was sort of definitely the Dublin Watford games were the two games I was sort of looking at in the lead to say, okay, we'll get a truer reflection of for Tipperary. Look, Kilkenny weren't at full strength. They're not the team they used to be. I just think in terms of the modern style of hurling, Dublin and Watford have adapted to it. They're further down the line in what they want to do. They know the style of play that they want to implement, and it'd be interesting to see how Tipp deal with it defensively too, how they offensively try to break it down and score against them.
Do you think it would be the end of the world if Tipperary lost this game? Because I think in general in Tipperary, when Tipp line out against Dublin, Tipp expect to win.
Yeah. It wouldn't, but there's a snobbery in Tipp that you shouldn't be losing to Dublin. Yeah. And sure, look, we had it in 2019 where we lost to them in a league quarter final, but sure, we were all Ireland champions a few months later. It didn't really matter in the greater scheme of things. Look, Dublin they're tier one. They're not where they were 10 or 15 years ago. They're okay. Maybe the last couple of years they've maybe flattered it. They've inconsistent, but I just think it's in year 4 of Matty Kenny. The players are still buying into what he's about, and like they're coming with momentum. They're definitely a team that that would feel maybe they need to maybe take momentum into the championship and getting to a league semi-final, or there's probably a league title there for them. You're probably anticipating that Limerick are not going to qualify from the other group. So look, for any team that's still in with a shout at making a league semi-final, I'll feel there's silverware to be won.
Yeah, and I just reflected on the 2 games that Tipperary have played so far, beating Laois by 21 points to 114. And when you look at Waterford putting up 731 against Laois, I suppose maybe you can sort of look at it through a different prism now, and you're wondering, is 21 points really that impressive? But then again, it was the first day of Tipp trying this new system, and also it was in horrific weather. Then following that up with a 119 to 118 win over Kilkenny. So I was looking at the amount scored in total and who's done the scoring for Tipperary. A rash of people have scored 1 point each, so we won't really go into that. But from 140 scored, Jason Ford has scored 21 points. Now 9 of those are from play. So 9, that's pretty good going, I'd say. Because you're talking about the guts of maybe, if you take away his 12 scores that are from placed balls, Tipperary have scored 29 scores from open play. 9 of those have come from Jason Ford, nearly a third. So that tells you how important he's been. Jake Morris has scored 1-5. Mark Keogh scored 4 points. All of them came against Laois. He didn't score against Kilkenny. Was fairly quiet in that game. And Michael Breen with 3 points. There is a real reliance on Jason Ford at the moment, isn't there?
There is, but I think it's something that Jason's comfortable with. I think definitely of the last 2 years, he's becoming more comfortable in his role within the team. Like you're sort of wondering, was he a corner forward? Was he a full forward? Was he a wing forward? Was he a midfielder? Well, I think centre forward is his position. Like, but I just think he's such an intelligent hurler. Like he will, and we saw it against Kilkenny. He's so good at drifting into pockets of space. Maybe where a Kilkenny defender has been sucked out, that he will drift into that. Particularly where the opposition maybe is centre back he's designated to sit, and if there's no midfielder sitting back to pick up like a forward, he's going to go to town. Like we've seen it last year in the Munster final and in the quarter final against Waterford. Like he's just so deadly. And look, I think he's thriving with that responsibility at the moment. But definitely, we do need a couple of more lads to step up. So it'll be interesting to see. Like I suppose that Jake Morris has put 2 back-to-back performances together has been encouraging, and like hopefully he'd be one I think could do with starting again this weekend just to build on what he's done so far.
Yeah, well, look, this is what we wanted to talk about now, and get your comments in. Let us know who you'd like to see start for Tipperary this weekend. Colin Bonner said that there will be changes after sticking with the same starting 15 for the first couple of games. Who would you like to see start for Tipperary this weekend, and why? That'll be a big part of this. And do you see the exact same game plan happening again? I would imagine it will. I mean, considering that it's of the group that Tipperary are in, 4 of the teams are either Leinster or kind of designated Leinster in the case of Antrim when they do get, if and when they're promoted again. So who's the first player that you would be looking at? And I'll just bring up on screen, these are the teams that we predicted before the start of the league, and we talked about this in last week's show, but just so people can see some of the names that might come into consideration. And there's obviously names beyond that too.
Yeah, so look, I was just went through the 15 I was going to select. Like I would think they probably will give Barry Hogan game time in the goals. Like I don't know if they're set on Brian Hogan as their number 1, but like there's every reason to think that Barry will get a couple of games. You think, okay, if Brian starts again, you think that's 3. Is he ahead of the pecking order? If Barry comes in now, and he'll probably get the Waterford game as well, that's 2 each. Like, so it's look, I think Brian has done little wrong. I think there's definitely like he saved from Richie Lahey the last day was outstanding. Probably Barry does hold probably more comfortable in terms of the mid-range puck outs, but it's very hard to pick off those mid-range puck outs now with teams setting up so deep. Like they're not really giving you the 40-50 yard puck out anymore. Like it's the corner back and start from there. So I don't know what you think in terms of the keeper.
I'd say Barry will get a chance this weekend. He probably didn't do a whole pile wrong last year.
No.
And I suppose it's still a bit of a shootout there. You would like to see someone really kind of nail it down. But one of the big things you need from a keeper is that, I mean, you obviously can't be allowing howlers in. That kind of goes without saying. But being able to pick out, hit someone who's in a small pocket of space on the move, being comfortable coming out and collecting the ball off your teammates and even carrying it out the field. And I know Brian Hogan has, played outfield and centre back for Lura many times. But, there's probably no harm in giving Barry Hogan a chance this weekend because he has proven that he is pretty mobile.
Yeah.
Do you think in the full back line we're going to see, or somewhere in the back line, we're going to see Owen Connolly get a chance? He did play against Kerry.
I'm not sure. I think he's been carrying an injury. I personally...
he wasn't in the panel the last day anyway.
No.
Yeah.
Personally, the full back line I'd nearly leave alone just on the basis that I think James, we need to see James Quigley up against a Ronan Hayes or a Donald Burke or an Eamon Dillon. I don't think we've seen enough in the first two games to hang your hat on James. Look, he's done nothing wrong, but I think Dublin is going to give him a severe test, and that's why I would leave Barrett and Barrett, Quigley, and Morgan. They've been good. We know Barrett. Look, Barrett is he sets the tone in that back line. He was outstanding in the second half against Kilkenny. Morgan, solid against Kilkenny. Billy Ryan gave him trouble when he got out in front and ran at him. But in fairness to Morgan, he never let him away. And I suppose Ryan didn't score from play, even though he got on a lot of ball, was an attribute to Morgan that he might have been beaten to the ball, but he never let him get away. And then
he set up the goal though. Now, to be fair,
he did. I suppose he did. But I suppose he wasn't. He had no real choice but to give the pass, because Morgan was sort of hanging off him like a rash, so. But the main reason would be to keep Quigley is because I think we'll get a truer indication of his level after this game.
Yeah, I'd nearly like to see, we know what Barrett is. We know his task. We know he's going to be starting come the summertime. Quigley and Morgan are the lads that we'd like to see get another test, and a step up in class, which it should be this weekend. I'd nearly like to see Barrett given a rest in this game. I mean, I'm sure he'd hate to hear that himself, but just to try another option back there, and the other two lads, let them get their test without maybe having the security blanket of Cathal Barrett around them. But of course, some of the other options that you could try back there, for example, if you wanted to move Seamus Kennedy back there, if you wanted to bring, Ronan Maher, maybe he'll get the start here. Maybe Brian McGrath. I'd have no problem in seeing those guys being thrown in there, because it's not like I think there'll probably be a couple of changes here and there. So if the whole idea is to find players for the summer, you already know you have Cathal Barrett. Let's give another few lads a go. And because Quigley has played with Morgan and those other few defenders around him, it's not like you're trying 10 lads for the first time ever and throwing them all out together. Like, they've had a chance to kind of gel with the likes of Barry Heffron and Dylan Quirk, Seamus Kennedy at this stage. So maybe, opt to give Barrett a bit of a rest this week and give other lads a go in with Quigley, Morgan, etc.
Yeah, maybe so. Like I would be thinking maybe the time to maybe give Barrett a rest with a Waterford game, and people might think, why are you doing that against a strong Waterford team? I'm thinking, look, we know Cahill's going to be there on Easter Sunday for the championship, so do we need to show our hand? Like, do we know he's going to do? I just feel it is probably an area worth taking in cornerbacks. I suppose maybe the day the cornerback has gone, I think Barrett and Morgan are the two out and out. Everybody else is sort of a hybrid halfback. Owen Connolly, Seamus Kennedy, even Barry Heffernan could go back there if he had to as well. But I actually think maybe a bit of stability there just for this game mightn't do any harm.
Yeah, no. I it's probably a toss of a coin thing there. So I see your point in that in terms of maybe give Barrett the game off against Watford. Yeah. Actually, considering how we were run ragged against Watford in the league there last year, if Desi Hutchinson is playing in that game, it would be good to see maybe another option or two getting a chance against him. Do you see Ronan Maher starting this game? He's obviously come in off the bench in previous games.
I do, and this is where I would see changes. I I suppose I'm looking at maybe sacrificing a forward and playing Cadell as the holder, and then a half back line of Dylan Quirk for him to build on what he did the last day. I thought, look, he's got 2 starts. I thought he was, as the game went on against Kilkenny, you could see he became more confident in what he was doing and bringing a bit of energy to it. I play Ronan Maher at 6 and give him the sort of, he just said, you saw the way he came on against Kilkenny and he won that ball and stuck it over the way. He sets the tone. Like he sort of said to everybody else, I'm the captain now, follow me. The brother is gone, but I'm the new spiritual leader. So I just thought that was fabulous. And I really hope we start seeing Brian McGrath soon. Like, he's going to be 24 years of age in the summer, and we sort of still haven't seen him establish himself at senior level. And I just feel if he's not starting in this game or the Waterford game, when is he going to start? Or is there still a doubt within the management that he's up to this level? They will be my quartet for in that sort of half line area, sort of a sweeper with Quirk, Cadell a sweeper and with Quirk, Maher and McGrath in front of him. That's where I'd like to see some changes for this game.
Yeah, they're definitely really good tests in that Dublin half forward line. Like Donald Burke has been playing very well out on the wing for Dublin. Like, he's just such a clean striker of the ball. He's always moving. He's got a deceptive bit of pace that I think we saw in the championship. Was it last summer or the summer before when he got away from the Kilkenny defenders and he scored a brilliant goal? Danny Sutcliffe is always a good test in the air and as well as on the ground. Like, he'll run at you all day. A very good sidestep. Like, that'd be a very good test for a Tipperary defender there. Fergal Whiteley would be that, they'll name 3 inside and he'll be the one that will come out in front of the other defenders. And then, like we already said, whether it's Ronan Hayes or Paul Crummy or Colin Curry or some of the other options that Dublin have for the inside, like, there's really good tests there. In the past, you would have thought against Dublin, you're going to come up against a good athletic physical team. But now it's a team who have a nice balance of really sweet hurlers in there too. So I think that's one of the big things that we're going to see, a good test. I agree with you. I think we'll see Ronan Maher in there. I think how they've used him in the first couple of games suggests that it's going to be more the half back line. And, obviously the great thing about Ronan is if he has a yard of space, a little flick of the wrist and he's else drive the ball 90 yards in. But, like, I agree with you. I'd like to see Brian McGrath at this stage. We don't know if he's carrying an injury, and I suppose we don't know what any players. Maybe he's like.
I suppose there probably is. Like, he's still. I suppose he's probably playing a little catch up. They probably give him extra time after a lot more exit, and of course he had that broken thumb issue. So, like, I suppose maybe they're just being cautious on that. But I suppose games are running out, and I'm sure he's anxious to get in there and show what he's about. Look, he's named on the bench the last 2 games, so obviously if he was on the subs bench, he was fit to contribute something.
Do you see John McGrath starting in this game? He wasn't initially named on the programme last week, but he was thrown in instead of Grode O'Connor.
Yeah, no, I'd like to see John. I'd like to see John getting the start now. I'm sort of looking at him and maybe Mark Keogh as a 2-man inside line. I thought maybe he did look a bit leggy against Kilkenny. Like, he did have a busy colleges scene around then. Like, he's got UCC he was with. Like, they've been beaten a couple of weeks now, so he would have got a bit of a chance over last week to freshen up. So I think we'd probably see him maybe looking a bit better himself. And then I would look at the half forward line, Dan McCormack, just to help out. He will drift back and help out the midfield, Jason Ford and Jake Morris. And I thought Jake in a sort of withdrawn inside forward role was good against Kilkenny. And in midfield, I was looking at Flynn, and probably I'd like to see more of this Barry Heffernan thing in midfield. I know he was pushed into the midfield in the last 20 minutes against Kilkenny when Ronan Maher came on. So I'd like to see maybe that from the start, to see, like, we know he's comfortable on the ball, and maybe when we're working the ball up the field through the hands, sometimes it does tend to break down around maybe half back line midfield. So if you have maybe a Brian McGrath shifting it on to Barry Heffernan, you're passing on to somebody who maybe is comfortable carrying it on a few steps too. And we know he's able to break a tackle and either deliver a nice ball in or take a long range shot. Like, so that would be one maybe experiment I'd like to see more of maybe this weekend, Barry Heffernan in the middle of the field from the start.
So there's definitely a bit of a balance in terms of, like, moving that ball through the hands in the middle of the field and getting lads on the ball. Like, because I don't think we got Alan Flynn or Michael Breen on the ball enough, but I mean, midfield is such a hard spot to play in terms of, like, where should you position yourself, and you feel like you always have to follow your man no matter where he's going. But like, I think that's something that will develop over time, and maybe you might in time see Michael Breen in the half back line driving forward from there, and Barry Heffernan midfield, or Dylan Quirk move up to midfield. You'll have to see how that evolves. But one thing I wanted to bring up is UL winning the Fitzgibbon Cup at the weekend, and obviously you had a Tipperary player at 6 in Brian O'Mara, at 9 in Kieran Connolly of Lockmore, and then Gerard O'Connor centre forward. Now, NUIG were robbed. Now, I don't mean intentionally robbed by the referee or the linesman or anything like that. You wouldn't accuse them of that at all. But it was a bad decision which saw Keane Lynch sent off, and then NUIG collapsed towards the end of the game. Mikey Kiley getting the winning goal for the Watford man. You couldn't help but come away and think Brian O'Mara and Kieran Connolly heading away for the summer, and how disappointing it is, because they look ready to step into county hurling.
Brian O'Mara, look, he's
a monster.
He's done some physical work, and he was a big chap last year when we saw him in the league. But by God, he's gone to another level altogether. Like, you think, Jesus, if there'd be one spot in the half back line nailed down if he was there, like in Kieran Connolly's engine. And he's actually added that scoring ability to his game now. And look, I'm sure maybe Gerard O'Connor's one that maybe Colin Bonner's thinking, okay, he's had a good Fitzgibbon campaign. Do I maybe give him another week to freshen up after the Fitzgibbon, or do I throw him in now when he's confident? Like, so, like, he could be one maybe. Like, where do you I can't see Dan McCormick being sacrificed in a game like this just because it's Dublin. You need a competent player in there. I wouldn't drop forward. I think Morris needs to. Maybe this is the game where Garrod probably comes off the bench maybe in the second half, and give him 20-25 minutes. So I think, especially when he's confident, and he's had a good run with UL. So look, you definitely think in the long run, like, these three guys coming in over the next few years, like Tipp, are well stocked. And look, I suppose it's probably just another unfortunate maybe negative impact in Tipperary hurling of the COVID, is that if COVID hadn't happened, Kieran Connolly and Brian O'Mara probably would have got their J1s out of the way over the last 2 summers. It's just that I think both guys are finishing up in college this year, and if you don't go now, you just won't get the J1 opportunity. And look, it's hard. You can't blame them. Like, they're young, and they're if the opportunity's there, they're every right to do it. But look, they could hurl for Tipperary for 7, 8, 9 years down the line. Like, so.
Yeah, you just think Tipperary's championship could be over by the middle of May, and they'd have missed out on playing a league and a championship. But look, like you said, I agree. You can't begrudge any lad heading away. What did stand out to me though is, a couple of times Brian O'Mara managed to strip Keane Lynch of the ball or hold him up, and that's something that every team is going to be struggling with this summer. Is how do you stop Keane Lynch? Who do you put on him? Tipperary have tried a couple of lads with, varying degrees of success, pretty much unsuccessfully trying to stop him. And when you see the fact that Brian O'Mara is able to hold up Keane Lynch a couple of times, that to me was like, this lad is ready.
Yeah. Oh, you can be sure he's studying in UL for the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. He's seeing things maybe from talking to some of the Limerick lads he would be hurling with in college, and maybe observing maybe a few training sessions in whichever college the team train, and to know, okay, this is what they're at. This is the level of physicality I need to get to. And look, he's getting there. There's no doubt. And fairness, Kieran Connolly and Gerard O'Connor seem to be doing the same. So maybe we need to get more lads down to UL and LIT over next year. Or sorry, MTU Limerick. I'm trying to. Is it? Oh no, sorry.
MTU Midwest?
No, it's TUS Midwest. I'm trying to get used to all these.
It's impossible to keep up with it. Gerard O'Connor, though, I mean, as Limerick have shown, it'd be no harm having a lad who looks like he's about 6'3" and playing the half forward line. Yeah,
it is, and it's gas. If you go back to that under 19, under 20 team that he was on, like, he was probably, if you were running 1 to 6 of the starting forwards of their importance and their contribution, he would probably be number 6. But in terms of now what he's potentially will bring to an adult team, he actually brings more maybe than maybe a Conor Bro or a Billy Seymour or a Andrew Orme in terms of his physicality and his size and the athleticism. And look, and he's able to score, and he's a good free taker as well. So look, you think, okay, maybe at underage level, maybe he wasn't the standout forward, but maybe as he gets older, his physical attributes are going to lend himself more to senior hurling.
Yeah, as I was watching him take the frees, the one thing for UL, the one thing that stood out to me is he's one of these free takers who throws his whole body through the ball when he hits it. Like, he's so many moving parts, and I generally think that the free takers who are really accurate, 9 out of 10, they have very, as few movements as possible, whereas he throws the whole body through it. And I just wonder, is that something that could be adjusted? But look, he's a free taker for years, and I'm not. So, but it's just an observation that I would have had there. Is there anything else that you're looking to see from Tipperary this weekend? Is Ger Brown going to continue to start? You mentioned Dan McCormick there.
Yeah.
I'd nearly be wondering, like, we know Dan is probably going to start in the summer. Like, is there anyone else competent we could nearly throw in there and see, is this guy going to be able to do the job also?
I'd say, like you say, as you say, maybe this is the one Dan sits out. We know he's going to give. Maybe you give Ger Brown a go. I don't know. It's I wasn't. It's hard to know. Like I was sort of hot and cold with Ger over the first 2 games. Like, I'm just. Will they stick at him again? Will they go Craig Morgan or Dylan Quirk and say, "Okay, Ger, you're going again"? I'm not sure whether wing forward is going to be his spot. Maybe you give him midfield and sort of give him the license there. But it's, I don't know. I'm struggling to figure out where his best position is going to be.
Yeah, I think midfield mightn't be a bad option. Yeah. Because the lads that we've played midfield so far have at times struggled to get into the game. Yeah. So maybe starting him a little bit deeper might be the way to go, because you know, when he can get on ball and use his pace, and I mean, this will probably be better weather again. I know that obviously it hasn't been great the last few days and week or so, but maybe the ground will start to firm up a small bit. The weather hasn't been as bad in the last few days, so you'd imagine he's a guy who's top of the turf sort of a player. And
there'd be a few other things you'd love to see. You'd love to see Nolan McGrath get game time. You'd love to see if Bonner Maher maybe get some game time. Just those that you think, okay, the championship is coming. These boys are slowly coming back. Look, Seamus Callanan got 15-20 minutes against Kilkenny. Look, he struggled in the air with Hugh Lawler in some of those physical battles, but he had a goal chance too that was blocked as well. You probably think Seamus at his peak would have got the sidestep in and stuck it in the corner. So, look, you can think, I suppose, worst case scenario, Tipp have only 3 matches left before the end of the league, before they play Waterford. And that's why you think there's sort of got to be, I'd love to see a bit of an edge in Tipp's play from Colin Bonner, thinking, okay, lads, this is a game we got to win this weekend. It's sort of a league semi-final. But look, not that I'm writing off the Waterford game. I just think that's going to be very, very hard to win in Walsh Park or Sunday week. I think if this is Tipp's best opportunity of getting 2 of the 3 wins they need to get to a league semi-final, this Sunday or this Saturday night offers that. Yeah. That's not saying Dublin are an easier win than Waterford. It's just it's a home game, familiar surroundings, bit of positivity. Like if Tipp lose this weekend and you're going down to Waterford on an off the back of a loss, like that makes that challenge even tougher.
Yeah, there's plenty of other big games this weekend. Limerick are up against Cork at the TUS Gaelic grounds, and obviously Limerick won't want to be losing 3 games in a row there. Offaly are against Clare, Galway are against Wexford, so that'll be a big test for Darragh Egan. Can he win a 3rd game in a row? And Henry Shefflin is looking to do the same. Kilkenny are against Laois, so I think we'll all expect a Kilkenny victory there, even though Laois will be looking to ensure they don't concede another 7-31. And then a battle of 2 Tipperary managers as Antrim face Waterford at Corrigan Park. So that'll be interesting to see Darren Gleeson up against Liam Cahill. Yeah,
definitely so. Antrim have been very, very competitive in the first 2 games. So I think it'll be interesting to see Waterford's mindset going up there. I think they probably won't have the Ballygunner lads back yet, but if they go up to Antrim and win maybe 9-10 points, you think, okay. Just say there's something about Waterford this year to think that what Ballygunner have done. Then Mikey Kerr or Kiley win the 2 winning goals and injury time. You think, God, is this setting itself up for Waterford again at the moment? But there's definitely a sense this weekend's league is sort of really kicking off. Like, you have Tipp Dublin, you have Limerick Cork, and you have Galway Wexford. Like, the big games are coming now, especially in the 1A side. You think the winner of Galway Wexford is going to get to a semi-final, and then you're looking at Cork, like Cork going to Limerick after what happened last year twice. Like, you think, God, like I've seen there's a bit of excitement coming in Cork after the first 2 league games, but they've beaten a very, very weakened Clare side, and it sort of looked like a challenge match sort of feel to it, and then they comfortably beat an Offaly time or and just struggling to find their feet at that level. So, I think Cork could get a really rude awakening this weekend, even minus maybe Limerick without Garrod Hegarty, and I suppose maybe Cian Lynch probably will come back into the thing. He was probably given a chance to focus on Fitzgibbon the last while. So, And look, you're thinking Cork. It's Cork Limerick's the first round of the championship too, if I'm not mistaken. No, it's Cork. It is Cork and Limerick. Yeah, so like that's only a couple of weeks away too. Like so.
Yeah, I think Cork will look for every opportunity to try and continue evolving their game plan against Limerick.
Yeah.
Conor Lahan is back on the panel. He looks like he's actually passing the ball at this stage, and he has the talent to be as good a hurler as there is. But sometimes a little bit selfish on the ball. Mark Keane, how will he get on as the year goes on? And like the way you were talking about Waterford there, right? And I was talking about this with Fintan O'Toole the other day. Is look at the quality they have. Like they've a hurler in the year in Austin Gleeson, who doesn't actually get talked about quite as much anymore. Jamie Barron, who was nominated for hurler of the year, so was Stephen Bennett. All-stars and Tyg de Burka, Conor Prunty as a full-back. And that's before you mentioned Pádraig Mahoney, Desi Hutchinson, who could become the best inside forward in the game, and Caleb Lyons, who's just a raiding half-back.
Plus, like, you have the Kieran Bennett's and Jack Prendergast just get through on a mountain of work, never do anything wrong. The Jack Fagans, like the guys that just do the unseen work, and they rarely let the side down.
Yeah, and they're into season 3 under what Liam Cahill and Mikey Beavens are doing there. Any other games that you're interested in talking about this week? I suppose we might as well talk about the Tipperary footballers. What happened last weekend was far from ideal. Going down to Wexford and the game was called off, like horrendous weather there.
Oh, sure. I made the trip down, and I was there most of the morning thinking, when is the text message going to come to say turn around and go home, and it never came. And in fairness, we got down there, and I suppose I walked into the ground about 1:20, and like I suppose the issue at that stage was just the strength of the wind. You'd say, God Almighty, this is like the wind was so strong. You said, how can you play a game of football in this? You'd be kicking into the town end, and like it's just how will the goalies kick the ball out, and then just all merciful squall arrived at 1:30, just as the two teams were starting their warm ups, and you could just see 5 or 10 minutes worth of rain, and the puddles were just. You could see the water lodging, and you said, no, this hasn't a chance here, particularly on the stand side. Like the ball couldn't roll, it couldn't bounce, like, and you just knew that. Like even then, there was no sign of the rain stopping after that, and even when it died, it eased off. So look, there was no other decision to make, and I suppose probably disappointed for both sides who wanted to play the game. And I know, speaking to David Power afterwards, he was anxious to play it because he just felt that they had a good couple of weeks in training. There had been a bit of a debriefing session where things were said between the management and players, and the players said, look, we're not happy with this, and the management said, we're not happy with this, and they felt there was a bit of an edge coming. They made 9, it would have been 10 changes from the Limerick game. There was a sense that, okay, maybe they're going to pick on the guys in the form, maybe some of the established guys, or they weren't going to go with established names, they're going to go with guys in form, whether you're young or old. And be interesting to see whether they go with the same selection again for Sligo on Saturday night, or whether maybe if there's a couple of injured guys, maybe they'll come back into consideration. But look, it's now a big game on Saturday night against Sligo. Sligo have 2 wins from 2, but you'd like to think maybe Tipp at home, potentially that if it's staying in Semple Stadium with a decent home following, you know yourself, there's going to be a couple of thousand people who walk out after the hurling match, which won't be ideal. But look, you take what you can get, and if they could snag a win here, like against one of the better teams in Division 4, it could just kickstart the campaign.
Yeah, and just looking at the results so far, just for anyone who doesn't remember, Tipperary drew away to Waterford 10 points apiece, and then were beaten handsomely enough by Leitrim 2-8 to 2-16 at Semple Stadium. Meanwhile, Sligo went and won in Wexford. They battered Carlow at 28 points to 5, which doesn't matter who you're up against. That's serious scoring on the 6th of February. Then last week, their game against Cavan was called off. What do you want to see from Tipperary this weekend?
I want to see a bit of spirit, a bit of energy, a bit of. I just thought maybe in the first 2 games there didn't seem to be much leadership out there apart from Conor Sweeney. I just love to see maybe a bit of energy, a bit about their play, a bit to taking the game to Sligo, taking a few more risks. Like Jack Kennedy is back; he's a big help. Robbie Kiley was named in the starting team, so they're going to bring a bit of energy, a bit of drive to it. So I'd like to see a bit of support for Conor Sweeney too. Like he's the scoring load is too much in him, and that'd be what I'd be hoping to see on Saturday night. And maybe having a few extra, a bigger crowd in Semple home game under the lights, that maybe they could just. And if you could beat a team like Sligo, you're going into maybe the rearranged game against Wexford. I'm assuming it'll be Saturday or Sunday week, because that's the only time it can be slotted in. The refixture hasn't been announced yet. And if you snag those 2 wins, then you're on the momentum train again into the last 3 matches. So that'll be. I just want to see Tipp enjoying their football, playing with it on the front foot, energy, taking the game to Sligo. That's what I want to see this weekend.
Okay, well, we're joined now by Thomas Conway, who's been reporting on the Tipperary ladies in both the camogie and the football so far this year. Thomas, how are you getting on? And I suppose we'll start off with the camogie. 2 wins from 2 and looking in rude health.
Yeah, we'll start off with the positive, I suppose. And, it is very positive from a camogie perspective. They were, again, another emphatic win on Saturday. Highly impressive performance. Now, I suppose you have to place it in context in that Tipp are, a fair bit ahead of this particular Offaly side. And I think Tipp have kind of established themselves as a real genuine top 4 team at this stage. The Gulfin class, the Gulfin standard was very evident last Saturday. And I have to say, though, Tipp were just, the kind of the ruthlessness, the relentless nature of their play was what really struck me. I mean, they scored 3 goals essentially within the first 10 minutes. Clodagh McIntyre, her usual kind of effervescent self, incredibly fast-paced, kind of high adrenaline game, and just a really impressive all-around performance. It's difficult to know how much you can read into it, because obviously Offaly were weak and they were missing a St. Ryan's contingent who were on club duty. So, I mean, and I was actually talking to Susan Erner, their boss, after the game. Like, they will improve as a side, but certainly from a Tipp perspective, things are very positive. But really, I think the real litmus test for Tipp will be kind of a showdown against Galway, which is their final group game in, I think it's 3 weeks, maybe a fortnight's time. And until then, we won't really know, how far they've progressed. But certainly, all the early signs are very positive.
So, did you get a sense, Thomas, from talking to Bill Mullaney, that up against the down team, 3-16 to 3 points, they were without their Portaferry contingent, and that because Offaly were down to Rhina's lads or Rhina's girls, as you
still there? Lost your connection briefly, I think.
Okay, I'll just go back on that again. Did you get a sense, Thomas, from talking to? Maybe you can't hear us there for a second. You might drop off and drop back on again, Thomas. Shane, just from the first 2 games, considering that Down were without the Portaferry girls and Offaly were without the Rhina's girls, that Tipperary might have a false sense of where they're at. Like 737 scored from 2 games. Maybe it's not quite as rosy, as in, let's not get carried away.
Yeah, there's an element to that, but then I would say Tipp haven't exactly put their full team out either. Like Mary Ryan hasn't started, Cait Devan hasn't started, she's only come off the bench in the 2 games. Karen Kennedy hasn't played yet, she's carrying a shoulder knock. Clodagh Kirk is still only coming back from injury, so there's definitely been an element within the 2 Tipp teams we've seen so far of giving some of the fringe players from last year more of a go, the likes of Claire Hogan and Jennifer Grace coming up from the junior team, and just making that panel deeper. And but I agree, look, I think that we'll get a better flavour of how this Tipp team are when they play Dublin and play Galway in the next couple of games. And there's one thing that maybe will give me optimism that this could be Tipp's year is that is Alan O'Connor is in there as S&C coach. Like, Alan has a great track record with Tipp minor hurling and football teams that won All-Irelands. The Lochmore team around 2013, 2014 that won the county titles. He was involved with all of them. And I suppose maybe the last couple of years, maybe Tipp were catching up in terms of S&C against the Corks and the Kilkennys and Galway. I think they've bridged that gap now. I think that there was definitely a sign of maybe in that All-Ireland semi-final last year, Tipp were just a small bit behind on the S&C side and maybe physically strong enough to take on that Galway team. I definitely think that gap looks to have been bridged. I don't know, Thomas, what you think?
Yeah, and apologies there for the misconnection. Absolutely, and I mean that has been really striking in their first 2 games. Like, the energy and the pace has just been phenomenal, and the fact that they've maintained it throughout. Now, again, I suppose Offaly and Down, not the strongest opposition, but it really kind of demonstrated the gulf in physical standards, in conditioning between the two of them. And Tipp have, you mentioned Cote d'Ivoire there, and she came on at half time on Saturday. Tipp have serious ammunition up front, and they have a kind of a variety of attacking options. You have players like Cote d'Ivoire, who's very much kind of a sharpshooter, obviously incredibly dependable from frees. Then you have the likes of Clodagh McIntyre, fast-paced. If Williams gets around the place, Claire Hogan then has been a very promising addition this year. I've been really impressed with her in the first 2 games, and she's kind of fulfilled a traditional role inside in full forward. And then you have the midfield partnership, which I think I'm going to reference previously, Grace O'Brien and Cueva Mar, and they're really the command center, if you like, of the Tipp team. 2 kind of highly experienced players. Grace O'Brien's joint captain with Julianne Burke. She has a real kind of attacking flair. I think Cueva Mar, her experience, I think it's, has been vital in the first 2 games. So Tipp are quite a diverse side. They have a lot of different options and a lot of different ways in which they can play.
Yeah, Thomas, I was just going to ask you. I just thought the last 2 semi-finals where Tipp lost to Galway in the All-Ireland, they didn't score enough to win those games. I just think, I know it's down and a week and down, a week and Offaly, but is there sort of a greater offensive mindset to what they're doing this year? But they're defending well enough to win games, but I think definitely in the last couple of All-Ireland semi-finals, they just haven't had enough of a scoring threat.
Yeah, and I think an emphasis has been placed on that. And I mean, you could probably see signs of it in the semi-final last year. Like I remember at one stage, I think it was Clodagh McIntyre tore up the field, and really kind of carved open the Galway defence. And I think they've kind of expanded their capabilities in that respect. They have, as I say, they have more options at their disposal, but there's definitely, Mullany, I think, has placed more of an emphasis on that attacking game. Like, they're very solid across the half-back line. And with Cueva Mar there, I almost consider, if you take the role, she's the defensive midfielder, and then Grace O'Brien is the attacking midfielder. And I think what has set Tipp apart in the first 2 games, is the athleticism going forward. An awful lot of players well able to run the ball. And then, as I mentioned, players like Cote d'Ivoire, who's very much a sharpshooter. So they have that kind of mix of score getters and runners who can create space. So, I mean, like, the fact that they've balanced that, I think it will be intriguing to see how they match up against Galway. Because, as I said, that will be the first kind of real litmus test of where they are at, of their stage of progression.
Thomas, just final question then on the camogie team. Do you get a sense from Bill Mullany talking to him after the games, like they've scored 737, conceded just 1-8 from 2 games, but that he's happy with what he's seeing? Like, I mean, all those players were missing for both of those teams. Do you get a sense of optimism from him?
Yeah, you do. No, you absolutely do. I mean, there's no creeping complacency there. They're aware that, they are far, and should be beating the likes of Offaly and Down by considerable margins, if they're to really seriously challenge. But he said it at the start of the year, and, I'm sure he'll repeat it, until they break that semi-final barrier. Tipp, that is Tipp's firm ambition this year, and they're going to have to upset, if they could pull off an upset against Galway, a game which is in Galway. I mean, I think that would be a major confidence boost. I think there's only so much that beating teams like Offaly and Down, and there's no disrespect to them, they're evolving, but they're at a different stage. But there's only so much confidence which that can generate until you really you really take on the big guns. There isn't the same degree of confidence there. So and even the selector, Ginny Ferncombe, did mention that the last day, but he feels there's been really good buy-in from a lot of the players, and he feels that Tipp are definitely, things are certainly going to plan so far.
Yeah, of course, Galway have All-Irelands in the bank, and have the likes of Sarsfields who are pushing for All-Ireland glory yet again in the club scene. We'll talk about the ladies footballers. So the 2 games so far, Kerry 11 points, Tipp 1-4, and then a bit of a comeback from Laois as they won 2-8 to 2-6. Thomas, how have the ladies footballers been getting on?
Yeah, I mean, there's no Sunday was a hugely disappointing outcome, despite the fact that it wasn't a bad performance. Now I should preface this by saying the game, there was a last minute venue change. The game was played in a place called Haywood Community College on a beautiful AstroTurf surface. But Peter Cretan was very aggrieved subsequently that it hadn't been called off entirely. And, you know, I kind of wondered myself, I mean, the conditions were really atrocious. Big, you know, sweeping wind across the field. Very difficult conditions for playing football. But I have to give it to both sides. It was actually quite a good quality game. And the AstroTurf surface probably contributed to that. You know, it was a fast-paced, kind of frenetic style match. And to be honest, Tipp impressed me at times. Their composure on the ball, when they're in possession, they're very kind of authoritative, commanding, they're patient, and they wait for gaps to emerge and try to kind of exploit gaps. Caitlin and Anna Rose Kennedy in midfield are really, really vital players. The engine room, if you like. But unfortunately, they just allowed Laois back into the game kind of in the lead up to half time, and particularly in the third quarter. The game was won in the third quarter. Laois corner forward Moan Ernie kicked several points. And like, I mean, Tipp are gonna, like, this is something Cretan has said previously. Like, ladies football, for whatever reason, there's a lot of counter attacking. That seems to be the modus operandi which most teams pursue. So if you're not able to sustain the opposition's purple patch, it's going to be very difficult to win games. And as yet, Tipp just haven't discovered how to do that. So I mean, like, there were promising signs in the performance, but you know, I mean, there's a lot to be improved on, and they have a game against Clare now, which could prove vital in terms of determining relegation.
Yeah, and just even Shane, in terms of like managing the situation, to have a great wind and just be a score ahead 2-3 points at half time, it's always going to be an uphill battle from there.
Oh, definitely. Like it was just, like I say, the conditions are just so bad last Sunday. Like you say, you saw, if you needed a decent win. We saw Kerry, they got up a decent wind, and I got up a decent lead. You just knew that a team like Donegal wouldn't be able to chase it back. Like, so look, it's just unfortunate. Like, if Tipp had snuck that win, they could have been heading for a semi-final now. They're playing Clare to maybe avoid being involved in a relegation playoff. Like, so look, it's I suppose it's just continuing the difficult run at the moment for Tipp. And look, it's not helped as the fact that we keep bringing up the excuse that they're not full strength. They're not really. Like, if this is a Tipp team with Aisling Maloney and Aisling McCarthy and Orla O'Dwyer, like, they'd be blowing teams away. Like, so in Division 2, but that's just where Tipp are. It's about consolidating and making sure they're not relegated, and hopefully building for the championship, and hopefully they'll have a stronger panel at their disposal.
Yeah, and Thomas, I suppose finally, is that what you expect to see come summertime? Do you think Peter Cretan will have a much stronger hand? And like, what were his thoughts after the game?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's no doubt you inject those three players into the setup, and suddenly it's an entirely different team, and possibly opens up new ways of playing as well. A player like Aisling Maloney, like, with her ability to kick points, that's probably what Tipp were missing to a certain extent. A marquee forward like her. I mean, Marie Cretan, I have to say, she was centre forward. She really impressed me in terms of, she good physical stature. She was able to break up the play there at centre forward. And like, I mean, Tipp Emma Morrissey is a good, is a nice sharp shooter. But Tipp don't have that kind of dependable marquee forward whom you know will do damage regardless of the circumstances. And Aisling Maloney will certainly offer that. I mean, yeah, Peter was, he was hugely disappointed after the game with the outcome. But he did, he referenced the fact that Tipp should have scored a lot more. I think, they finished with 2-6. He totted up 4-10 is what they, had they taken not even all their chances, but a majority of their chances. So, that would suddenly change the complexion of this team, certainly those three players. But when you think about it, they've been without the likes of, the two Aislings for the bulk of the past year. So, they've had plenty of time to evolve as a team without them. And until they're back, there's no point in in contemplating what might be. Like, I think the game against Clare will be massive, but look, they've delivered big performances before. Last year, the championship relegation, the senior championship relegation game against Tyrone, really impressive that day, and really kind of blew expectations out of the water. So, I mean, it's in them, even without their three, those 3 stars. They're able to produce performances, and hopefully they'll deliver against Clare.
Absolutely. Just before we finish up, then, Shane, any final thoughts on Tipperary heading into this weekend in any of the codes?
I suppose I just hope the weather is half decent so we can go and enjoy some proper matches rather than being destroyed by wind. So yeah, that's it. So we just hopefully the double header goes ahead on Saturday night.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, my thanks to Shane Brophy and to Thomas Conway for joining us this week. We'll be back again next week. Thanks very much, lads.
Cheers.
Cheers.